Welcome to Envision More. Here, we dig deep into the insights of first-generation wealth builders, unearthing stories of passion, resilience, and relentless vision. Your host is Wayne Wagner Jr., founder of Visionary Wealth Management. So sit back and dig in. It's time to envision more.
Hey, this is Wayne Wagner. Welcome to another episode of the Envision More podcast. And today we have got the pleasure of having Dr. Samuel Dyer with us. Samuel and I met here in the last couple of months, really just bouncing around LinkedIn and social media, came across one another. And Samuel's got a fascinating story to share with us today about his personal journey and how he is really supporting a specific subset of folks within the pharmaceutical industry doing really important work every day. So, Samuel, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Wayne. I'm excited to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about this profession.
Yeah, that's great. Samuel, you are the head of the MSL Society, and we'll talk about what MSL stands for because some of our listeners won't know what that is, and then our folks in the pharma industry are going, "I know exactly what that is. Why wouldn't anybody know what that is?"
Yeah.
So. But Sammy, your background, because you were an MSL for a long time during your career, let's talk about your education background, kind of how you got to here.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, my academic background, and really my professional journey has been is quite diverse. Of course, I have a bachelor's degree in biology and a master's degree in biology, and then I did a PhD in medicine and health sciences specifically. And recently, and really, I guess it all starts 31 years ago. I actually went to medical school prior to breaking into the pharmaceutical industry. And due to a family tragedy, my mother passed away, and really financial strain. I had to leave medical school, and of course, it always bothered me. So I went on, of course, academically, got a master's degree and a PhD, but it always bothered me. So during the pandemic, which, as I'm sure you probably know, like so many other aspects in our lives, the pandemic affected almost everything, including medical schools. And for medical schools, that meant going to virtual instruction. And I saw that moment as a once in a lifetime opportunity to rectify something that has always bothered me. So I said to my wife, "Hey, I want to try this. Let's see what happens." And so I applied and went back to medical school during the pandemic. And what was interesting about that is, among other things, is I didn't tell anyone. I did not tell one soul except for a close friend and one family member. So, or my wife rather, and no other family members. So no one on the staff of the MSL Society, no other friends, family. And I did that, Wayne, because I was confident I would not make it. I was confident that I didn't want to tell everybody, "Hey, I went back to medical school." And then the next semester, like, "Hey, I failed out of medical school." So, I just thought that, better hold that to myself until I'm confident I can make it. So when I finally made it to clinical rotations in January of last year of 2023, I finally announced it on LinkedIn and to the world. And, of course, a lot of people were shocked. And then, of course, that culminated with me just graduating last month. It's been about a month now. And at 51 years old, graduating from medical school. So that's a little bit about my academic background and where I'm at today.
Yeah. And a little bit of background there in terms of 31 years ago would have put you at 20. So you would have been your undergrad at that point, really focused. And so it sounds like you lost your mom during college, and that's a difficult season of life to lose a parent. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
It was tough. And, it was obviously, a big adjustment to a lot of things. I'm actually the very first person in my entire family to go to college. And so that, obviously resulted in a lot of unique challenges and so it changed a lot of things. And so it was not only a family tragedy to go through, but it also resulted in a lot of financial hardship and
Yeah.
other things. And so it just,
Yeah.
ended up being an impossibility.
Yeah. And so you get through your undergrad in biology, but it's at some point you end up in the pharmaceutical industry looking up what is an MSL or
Yeah.
tripping into that somehow. What's that leap look like?
Yeah. So, 24 years ago, I was back in 2000, I was teaching at a medical college and really was considering other career opportunities when I came across an advertisement in a newspaper. Remember those newspapers?
It's a newspaper.
And I saw an advertisement for something called the Medical Science Liaison. And of course, at the time, I had no idea what an MSL was, and the description really didn't help either. But it was intriguing. And so I really wanted to set out to learn more about the role and what is this, and thinking about a career in the pharmaceutical industry. And I didn't know anyone that had ever done the job or, frankly, even more broadly, worked in the pharmaceutical industry. So, and what made it, of course, a little more challenging, this was, if you think about it, 24 years ago, this is really the birth of the internet, right? So
Yeah.
information is
Yeah.
not even really widely accessible. So I did something very unconventional, maybe even a bit crazy. I actually went door to door of physicians' offices in my town. And I asked them, hey, because I knew there was pharmaceutical industry and reading from the description and gathering a little information I could, that they worked with physicians, right? So I thought, and I didn't know a lot of details about the role, and I would come to find out a lot more detail later that maybe it would have been a little easier to do it a different way. But at that point in my knowledge of the role, so I actually went to several offices, and I would just ask them, can I sit in your lobby and wait for these people from the pharmaceutical industry to come in and so I can network with them? Obviously, it was a bit crazy, but it was the only way that I could figure out how to learn more about the industry and network. But through this approach, and this took months, I did this for months. And several physicians, I told them that I went to medical school. So there's a bit of a parity and a little bit of an understanding. And they were accommodating. A few of them were like, you want to do what? No, you can't sit in my lobby and be some weirdo sitting in the lobby, right? But I will say most of them were very accommodating. And so, and in fact, I distinctly remember one office in particular. One of the office managers, she just loved me. We just had a real connection, and I think she felt really sorry for me. And anybody who was willing to do this, she was trying to help. But every time somebody would come in from the pharmaceutical industry, she'd like lean over to the side of the window and be like, that's one right there, right? And it was great. So doing this method, I befriended, actually, of all roles. And again, I didn't really understand the distinction between a pharmaceutical sales rep and a medical science liaison. And I befriended a sales rep first who, after a bit of a time, we went out for coffees and just trying to understand the industry, and he was very accommodating. He ended up introducing me to his sales manager, who then eventually introduced me to the MSL manager. And really that networking approach and determination opened the door for me, and have really, I've been deeply involved in, obviously, the industry ever since. And so it was that pivotal moment that, frankly, shaped the entire career trajectory for me. And what really drew me, after reading the job description in the newspaper, and of course learning about the role and talking to MSLs and sales reps over that period of time, what drew me to the role was that unique blend of science, strategy, relationship building. And I really quickly realized that the MSL role was exactly where I can make an impact by not only supporting healthcare professionals, making more informed clinical decisions, but also ultimately, indirectly, because I'd always said that I was going to practice medicine and really have that direct patient care. This was an indirect way of doing that. So that's how I broke in.
That's incredible. And I think that we hear lots of stories from 20, 30, 40 years ago of people, doing that kind of research. Today is that we live in such a social media driven environment that most of our listeners probably don't even know what a newspaper is. So
It'd be absurd, right? This was long before LinkedIn and social media. So they'd be like, well,
right?
yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, talk to me about. I mean, you just touched on something that is. I've had the same question, which is, what is the difference between a sales rep in the pharma industry and an MSL? So,
Yeah.
what is the difference?
Yeah. So you think about a sales rep is, of course, a part of a department or division in a pharmaceutical industry called the commercial, right? So it's
Hmm.
the commercial side of an organization. Medical science liaisons work for a department or division called medical affairs. So in medical affairs, we typically have, for most companies, that's something, medical science liaisons, medical information, medical directors. They think about chief medical officers. That's all part. And those are completely separate functions, roles, responsibilities. And so we think about, what is an MSL? An MSL really, or medical science liaison, the role has been around since 1967. It's been around a long time in the United States, and it has exploded in growth over the last couple of years globally. But what they are is really the way to look at it is they are the internal scientific expert who really serve as almost a critical bridge between the company that they work for and the healthcare providers that they support. And they're really there and responsible for facilitating unbiased, and that is key, unbiased scientific exchange, and engaging with specific healthcare providers that we call key opinion leaders, KOLs. And among other things, is to gather and provide insights and really ultimately help shape clinical practice and improve patient outcomes. And
Hmm.
so, one of the things that I always describe the MSL as, and thinking about the core purpose of an MSL, is to help healthcare professionals and specifically KOLs make more informed clinical decisions, right? Through this scientific exchange. And so by providing relevant evidence-based information, MSLs are really there to ensure that the latest clinical data and research are accessible to clinicians and again, ultimately improving patient outcomes. And so, thinking about the sales piece, though, it's important to understand that MSLs are not involved in sales in any way. Their
Hmm.
focus is on building relationships based on trust and credibility. And
Right.
so, really, they're there, and they're often seen as that go-to scientific resource of information, and they really play a critical and pivotal role in ensuring that the latest advancements in medicine are communicated effectively to the KOLs and other healthcare providers that they support.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so what and I'm just thinking about how the pharma industry has shifted and changed over the last 30 years where there are fewer sales reps, fewer salespeople, and companies have necessarily needed to move towards, either hire a sales team model where you've got third party companies who are really providing the sales reps, or um, companies have just downsized the number of reps they have across the board. And part of that's due to technological improvements and the ability to meet physicians virtually and that kind of thing. But part of it is, uh, the fact that there's all kinds of compliance risk and issues, and certainly we've seen that across the industry over the decades. And so there's almost a need. So at the same time, companies are cutting the sales budgets, the salesperson budgets. There's a need to continue to provide better and better, more accurate scientific knowledge, to those same physician groups. And so even though that salesperson may or may not have the relationship with the physicians in that hospital or in that system, providing the MSL coming in with a bit more scientific rigor, with a bit more depth, with a bit more, the ability to be more broad in what's being delivered and more objective in terms of delivering the information. I see that as almost a necessary growth industry in an industry that's been cutting people and headcount on the sales side.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and you've tapped into some of the reasons why we've seen an exponential growth of the MSL role, and not just in pharma. So we've seen an exponential growth of the MSL role in pharma, and that's certainly small, medium, large pharma, biotech, CRO, clinical research organizations, medical device, medical diagnostic companies. We even now have MSLs in veterinary medicine, right? So we're seeing it across multiple company types. And it's interesting, why the role has exploded in growth. You laid out, and you were absolutely right, some of those reasons why that's happened. Some of the other ones would certainly be the increasing complexity of drugs, and we think about biologics would fit into that, and some of the other vaccines, and some of the things that require complex scientific discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, the regulatory body has changed, these kind of things. But I will tell you, it is clear, the data is clear, it's evident why the MSL role has exploded, and why pharmaceutical sales rep numbers have almost went to the edge of a cliff and fallen off.
Yeah.
And here's the reason. The primary driver of this globally is one word: access. Access to KOLs. And so what we actually did a study on this to find out what the average time that a sales rep gets with a KOL versus an MSL for the exact same KOL just a couple of years ago. And what we found out was that in 2022, the average time that a sales rep gets with a KOL is 0 minutes. Zero, right? Prior to the pandemic, it was about just under 2. Now, what was it for MSLs? Prior to the pandemic, it was 45 minutes. So as of 2022, it was about 30 minutes. Now, that's stunning in of itself. But then we asked the exact same question to KOLs. What was the average time that you give an MSL today, right? The average time, according to KOLs, about 500 KOLs, they told us the same thing, up to 30 minutes. And this is the interesting piece. I can guarantee you there is no physician practicing any type of medicine anywhere in the world that is giving up 30 minutes of their clinical time to anyone that does not add value.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the driver. That's really so what companies have said to them is, the result of that is like, wait a minute, I have people that can get 30 minutes versus on average 0. Of course, we're going to hire more MSLs. Right. So that's the driver. But you're right. Those are certainly some of the other reasons.
Yeah. Now, in your experience, are the MSLs located in the region similar to a sales rep? So they're traveling to the physician practices or offices?
Yeah.
Or are they more of a remote or larger region type role?
From that comparison, they're identical in terms of they have big territories. The difference between a sales rep and an MSL, a sales rep might have, I don't know, the greater Chicagoland area, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas MSLs, and we know this actually, we have data on this as well, they're averaging between 6 and 8 states. There is no such thing as an MSL for Illinois or even Chicago, right? So they're going to cover the Midwest, and that means, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, so on and so forth. So yeah, they work from home, but every day they're going out and engaging with KOLs in the office. Of course, they do virtual engagements as well, but certainly they have large territories.
Yeah. Well, and from the physician side, like you said, it is a different animal to be able to sit down and bring my top 5 clinical conversations or things that I'm using this drug in, in this situation. The patient doesn't seem to be responding the way that, the stats say that they should be. Let's talk about the other drugs in the category, and do I need to go off formulary and all that kind of stuff. Be able to have that on an informed basis, obviously without disclosing, personal identifiable information about the patients, but to be able to do that with someone who has a much broader view of the industry and that's specific to this category of drug or this category of illness. So
Yeah, and I think to the point, Wayne, and we also think about the academic background of an MSL. In the
mhm.
United States, the industry standard, and has been for a long time, is a doctorate degree. So
Mm.
typically that's a PharmD, MD, PhD, right? So
Mhm.
these are
Okay.
all highly trained scientific individuals. And the idea, again, about behind an MSL is, I always say that, again, your entire purpose in life is to help that physician make more informed clinical decisions. And if you don't do that, you fail as an MSL.
Mm.
So that is your role. And the KOLs pick up on that as well, because now if I want to use the drug in X situation, do we have data that justifies that clinical decision? And
Right.
so, I'm, as a clinician, asking you, tell me where that data is. What does that look like? Cite that information, so on and so forth. And so that's really the purpose of it. And so that's the value proposition.
No, that's great. Now, you were an MSL for a period of time,
Yep.
but the story as I heard it was that you got drunk one night in Europe and something else some other pieces started falling together, and it might have been the craziest decision of your life. But today you're the executive director of the MSL Society. So at some point, and you were there at its birthing. So there had to be some alcohol involved in that decision. But walk us through that transition.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought we had an agreement that we weren't going to talk about this, but you've already talked about it, so I'm gonna expand on that. Yeah, no, yeah. So I started as an MSL back in 2000. Did it for several years, then moved into management, leading MSL teams, then executive management. I've been fortunate that I've lived in 11 different countries and I've managed MSLs in more than 60. So seen. Managed MSLs and operations in more than 60 countries. I've seen it done in a lot of ways. So what started this whole thing was back in 2010. We were living in Paris, France, and one night, it is true, over French wine, a group of us got together, and as sometimes as bad decisions are made over French wine, I don't know, but we got together and decided and talked about creating the first ever, actually anywhere in the world, anything for medical affairs or MSLs, a organization dedicated to helping advance the profession. And I swear it's true, Wayne. We all said that, hey, let's do this. And I swear the next question was, what's a society? Because none of us had ever done it. And so that's really where it all started. And the idea was, and the reason, the motivation for me doing it and wanting to do it, I was simply frustrated. I could not find credible resources out there and things that to help my teams. And so we had, a lot of people reaching out saying, hey, are you aware of this? Do you have this? And of course, always the answer was no. And a lot of that was, if it's proprietary information for a company as well, obviously you can't share that. So that's really where it all originated at.
Yeah, and you touched on something there too. I mean, in 2000, you were going through a newspaper and came across an ad. So how to recruit credible, trained, appropriate people into the industry, and really not just in the U.S. but across the world at this stage, given the breadth of the society's membership at this stage, which we haven't talked about yet. But so you do you just quit your job and start trying to drum up membership for the society in 2010, and here we are 14 years later. You're an overnight success, or there was some kind of evolution there from some good French wine and some big decisions.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, 14 years later, it's an overnight success. I mean, that'd be the way to describe it. It certainly, culminated over time. The we started out with the idea that it was primarily going to be and still is a membership organization, right? So you sign up for an annual membership and you get access to all the resources, which I can kind of go into, and maybe I haven't really talked about the purpose of the MSL Society, um, but yes, we started out with a few resources and offerings, and that, of course, has culminated into today. And maybe some context of sort of the mission and the purpose of the society would help with that. So, the MSL Society is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and really, we set out back in 2010 and still is our driver today. The mission was to support professional growth and development of the MSL profession globally. And so today we have members in more than 100 countries, and we provide a lot of different resources, everything from, of course, training, and trying to create that sense of community. Our purpose, of course, is to elevate the profession by really advocating for this, what I term as a critical role in the industry. And we do that by, certainly ensuring that MSLs have the critical skills, knowledge, et cetera, that they need to excel in their careers. And so we also work on raising the awareness and the impact of MSLs have on healthcare, highlighting their unique role, of course, and so we really are supporting the profession and everything from aspiring MSLs to current MSLs to MSL leaders that are looking to build their skill set. And so we think about offerings today and kind of what has culminated over time. We have the first ever certification for MSLs. We do a lot of training programs, both open enrollment as well as customized. We do live webinars, a lot of reports, that kind of thing. And so those are kind of some of the offerings. But of course, that has progressed, over time to what we offer today.
Right. And at some point in this process, there's a book over your shoulder that you wrote. And you decided to actually write a book about how to get into the industry. And so when was that published, and what's the direction and purpose of that?
Yeah. So the book, in case people can't read it, there is called the Medical Science Liaison Career Guide, How to Break Into Your First Role. And it was written to basically fill gaps in resources for aspiring MSLs. I published now 2 editions. First edition was in 2014, and then a brand new edition just a few months ago. The new edition and what changed and what I did this one is I conducted a survey with 185 managers to understand what they actually look for when reviewing applicants. And the idea behind the book is both editions really, but the second edition in particular is really to provide practical guidance on how to navigate this very competitive hiring process, and strategies that candidates can use to break into the profession. And certainly the book has been, and I'm happy to say, instrumental in expanding not only the reach, of course, of the MSL Society and our resources, but it's helped thousands of individuals around the world understand what it takes to be an MSL, what is an MSL, how are those roles different than other roles? And it's not just about landing the job, but it's also how to prepare individuals to excel in their career, um, and make a meaningful impact in the field. And so I'm very happy to also share that the book, the new edition, has now won 3 very prestigious awards and helped countless of people break into the profession. So
That's fantastic.
that's really the purpose, and why I published the book, and what the driver was, why I wanted to do it. I was constantly contacted by people on LinkedIn and across social media, like, how do I do this? What do I need to do? And so I
Right.
just, been writing all these emails for over the years. And so I just formalized that into a book.
That's great. Well, my knee jerk was this chapter 1, the story of going in and knocking on every physician's door in your town and sitting for endless hours to waiting to meet pharmaceutical sales reps. So,
Yeah.
or maybe it's how not to have to
Yeah, how not to have
do
to.
that.
I did touch on my story a little bit, but shared some best practices on, I'm going to make this thing a lot easier than what I had to go through.
Yeah. And when I saw that you had written the book on this, Samuel, I wanted to immediately wanted to have you here on Envision More, because a lot of what we do with our clients is to help them think about their career like a business, and how do you advance in the business? How do you grow your business? How do you advance in your career, grow your career? And so the idea of on the front end, helping people into, like, we have a lot of clients who are MSLs who are doing their financial planning, we're doing multi-generational wealth management, and I know what those people make. And it's a great career, it's a great life. And so, helping people on the front end, and then creating a society where they can grow together, come together in a community, sharpen one another, get better together, and cross pollinate as the industry changes and merges and moves around, and there's need for connections to find the next role and the next role after that. I think the society is a fantastic platform. So for you to kind of have a, cradle to grave, situation here within the industry, within the MSL community, to say, hey, here's how you come in, here's how you matriculate, become part of a community, mature in the role, and then ultimately, hopefully, provide financial freedom for yourself and enormous benefit to mankind because of you sharing your knowledge and bringing who you are to the industry, and then be able to retire respectfully and with dignity.
Yeah, and I love what you talked about there, Wayne, because the my personal philosophy, and of course that means, as the CEO of the MSL Society, I'm gonna push that onto the organization as well. Although it's not hard, because the people that we have involved in our organization buy into it completely. But the founding principle of our organization, and me personally, do the right thing and pay it forward. And a lot of the rewards will come from that, right? So you think about personal branding and leadership in business, just treat people, be kind, right? And do the right thing and pay it forward. And so I've always been big on, all these people that we've helped break into the profession. I never get tired of hearing it. Of course, I love it every time. It feels amazing. But I always say to everybody, I helped you, you help the next person.
Yeah.
And I'm really big on that. And so I think that, anybody listening and you're thinking about, how do I take it to the next level? I think start there. It will never fail you.
No, that's great. So where does the society is in over 100 countries, thousands of members. I would imagine dozens, if not hundreds, of companies represented. Um, where do you go from here?
Yeah. It's a great question. One of the things that we did not plan on, wasn't even a part of the strategic plan or objectives, is training programs. It just wasn't on the radar. Today, and has been for 6 years or so, the largest source of revenue for the MSL Society is training MSL teams. We've now conducted training programs in more than 20 countries for 70 plus MSL teams, for 70 companies. And it's not letting up. We're going to continue to do that. And I love it. I absolutely love being a part of, especially, a newer MSL early in their career, their journey. We have a lot of people reaching back out to us over the years saying that, it really did make an impact, and certainly impacted their ability and to have success in their career. So I see that continuing. We will increasingly do more training programs. There's some other programs that we're planning on launching at the end of this year, beginning of next, some new things that we're going to go into. But we'll just continue really doing a lot of what we're doing, and that is making a positive impact on aspiring MSL and MSL leadership careers, and helping them excel in their careers.
Yeah. Well, and one of the key groups of folks that I see moving into the MSL space is um, the PharmD. I meet PharmDs in the pharma industry who are working as MSLs or working in regulatory affairs somewhere, and for many of them, that just was not any the pharma industry wasn't on the radar screen. Like
Yeah.
they literally wanted to be a pharmacist, and
Yeah.
and it was the pharmacist was as much as they could see at the time they were in school getting that degree. And so that's a category of folks that I really do think needs to be expanding their sphere of vision to say, hey, what's possible? Dare I say, envision more for themselves, because a lot of them can be kind of pigeonhole themselves into, hey, I'm going to be a pharmacist, I'm going to work for XYZ chain pharmacy or whatever, when the MSL track is opens up a lot of other opportunities and a lot of upward mobility.
Yeah, and in fact, today it is one of two. The PharmD and MD is the most common academic credential of an
Right.
MSL. And so, there are a lot of MSLs that are PharmD. But I think, to your point, and one of the things I always describe the MSL role is, it's one of the best kept secrets in the pharmaceutical industry, right? It's elusive. Nobody, a lot of people don't know what it is. How do I get information? That kind of thing. Obviously, it's one of the purposes of the MSL Society, to help educate those individuals. But, for someone who's a pharmacist, it's a great career alternative. And I will say this, certainly I'm biased, and I acknowledge that, but the MSL role is the single greatest job in the world. It just cannot get better. It just can't. There's no way. So if you are a
How do you
science
really
nerd,
feel, Samuel?
yeah, tell me. Yeah, exactly. But, if you're a science nerd, what job is better than this, right? And so that really is. And the other thing that I love about the MSL profession is it's just that, an end profession. You do not need to go on. A lot of MSLs, what happens is they become an MSL, they never leave,
Right.
meaning they don't even go into management. They stay in MSL forever. And
Right.
so that's a great opportunity. And you think about the challenges with salaries, and as you kind of alluded, one of the cool things that the MSL Society does is we do a lot of surveys. And we've now conducted more than 250 global surveys, and published them over the last few years on every aspect of MSLs. One of which is the annual MSL salary and compensation survey, right? So we know to the dollar how much MSLs make in across the world. And you think about in the US, the starting salary as of 2023 for a brand new MSL with zero experience is about $166,000 base salary.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you think about, okay, well, if that's true, right, and you think about all these other aspects, the challenges with that, that's part of the reason why the job is so competitive to break in.
Right.
Because who doesn't want to work from home and make that kind of money?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's in an industry, in a space where people in those roles, if they're working for publicly traded companies, you've got plus your healthcare benefits, plus your 401k match, plus your long-term incentives, plus your annual bonus. So there's multiple other prongs of that compensation that easily push that up closer to $250,000.
And
You know,
that's right. Yeah, Wayne. And I'm going to give you a car, brand new
right.
car, or a car allowance. I'm going to give you a gas car, drive wherever you want. I'm going to pay for your mobile phone. I'm going to give you a home office. I mean, there is a lot of benefits to the job. So yeah, I mean, and all of that, I think, as you pointed out, drive up not only overall total compensation, but also competitiveness.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and as you said, and we want ultimately we want competitiveness in that role because of the amount of impact and amount of value that can be driven. You think about the opportunity to impact how many you're going to touch, how many physician practices you're going to touch, how many thousands and thousands of patients. I don't know if it was before we started, before you started recording or not, but you said something about this was really an indirect ability for you to touch patients' lives. And that's where you started your journey, was really a desire to be an MD and to actually touch people's lives. And this career is actually giving you the ability to exponentially touch more lives than you would have in an individual practice.
It's yeah, absolutely true. And more broadly for the MSL profession, one of the things that I always describe the MSL as, and certainly clarify on, is the MSL role is not a scientific role. The MSL role is a communication role through science, right? And that is a really important distinction because, to your point, right, my direct ability to go out and communicate and make an impact and make a connection and make a relationship, a value-added relationship with a KOL, directly impacts my ability to have that influence and have that ability to make that impact. So yeah, absolutely.
That's great. This has been a fantastic conversation, Samuel. I want to ask, and so we're going to make sure that we've got some links to connect with you on LinkedIn, to look up your book on Amazon and so forth. We'll put those in the notes section of this podcast. But is there anything that we've missed or should touch on here when we're thinking about the MSL career and or society?
No, I mean, I think we've covered it. I think certainly, if you are an aspiring MSL, somebody who is thinking about this as a profession, I would just say, educate yourself. If you are looking for resources out there, I would say be careful. There are a lot of people trying to sell ridiculous services and things that are out there. So you just got to be, sort of cautious with that. Because the one thing that I would say is that it is very, very competitive. And so you just have to be prepared and really understand the role, be prepared throughout the entire interview process. But I think even for those who are trying to, as an experienced MSL or an MSL leader, certainly the MSL Society offers a lot of resources that can help you excel, learn best practices, new techniques. So that's probably what I would say in terms of those people who are listening that either are already in the community or thinking about joining the MSL profession.
Well, Dr. Samuel Dyer, thank you so much again for joining us here on the Envision More podcast. This has been a fantastic conversation about the value of the MSL role and the opportunity to really impact patient outcomes in that role throughout the industry. Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to the Envision More podcast with Wayne Wagner Jr. of Visionary Wealth Management. We hope you were encouraged and inspired by the conversation today. If you want to dig deeper into the show notes or Wayne's work at Visionary, you can find us at envisionmore.com. Envision with a Z. Advisory services are provided through Wealth Plan Investment Management. Wealth Plan Investment Management and Visionary Wealth Management are separate entities. The content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Thanks for listening.